Okay, so you've given us quite a bit here.
Yeah, a whole stack.
All about studying biotechnology abroad.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like you're really wanting to figure out what all the options are out there.
Definitely, yeah.
And we're going to deep dive into all of this stuff together. So we're going to take all these articles and guides that you've provided
Right.
and try to condense it down into something that's useful for you.
That's right.
Okay.
A nice structured approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why would someone even want to think about going abroad
Right.
to study biotechnology?
Well, I think what's interesting here is that a lot of the sources are sort of focusing on the access that you get. It's not just about availability,
Right.
but it's access to that cutting edge research,
Yeah.
to the thought leaders who are guiding that research, and to the technology that's being used in these spaces.
Yeah. And it seems like they're not just talking about the universities themselves, but also the industries that are sort of surrounding them.
That's right. Yeah.
And how those two things are kind of feeding each other.
Exactly. And this idea of application, and how these programs abroad have quite a strong focus on putting the theory into practice.
Right.
It's interesting. We have a quote here from Professor John Williams at the University of Cambridge. And he was talking about how studying in these leading destinations like the US, the UK, Germany, and Canada, it offers students the latest research, top-of-the-line laboratories, as well as industry partnerships, which can greatly enhance the prospects for their careers.
That's really interesting. And I think it's that practical element that we've talked about a lot on this show.
Yeah.
I mean, we both have been in those situations where you learn something in theory, but then it's a very different thing when you actually get your hands on it.
You need to get your hands dirty.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just the technical skills. It's about problem solving. It's about critical thinking and working in teams and those kind of real world skills.
Yeah. And in the source material, Dr. Priya Desai, she was a biotech researcher, and she emphasizes this interdisciplinary kind of approach that's being fostered in a lot of these programs.
Right.
That blends things like bioinformatics and genetics and pharmacy.
Exactly. And she made a really good point about developing a global mindset.
Yeah.
And how crucial that is for tackling these global challenges, particularly in health, agriculture, and environmental sustainability.
Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about, okay, where do I actually want to go and do this?
Right.
All of the articles mention a few of the same places.
They do.
And it's probably not a huge surprise, but I think for good reason. The U.S., the U.K., Germany, Canada, and Australia.
Yeah, all the usual suspects.
Yeah, they keep coming up again and again.
They do.
Singapore also gets a mention.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at each one of those. Let's start with the United States.
Okay, well, the United States is often considered that hub for innovation in biotechnology. It's got some of the most prestigious universities, and it gives you exceptional access to the sector, particularly in hubs like Boston and the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't forget about all that venture capital money that's out there, too.
Absolutely. It's a hotbed for investment.
Yeah.
Which is quite exciting.
Yeah. And the sources mentioned MIT and Harvard and Stanford and UC Berkeley.
All the big names.
Yeah. And in terms of scholarships, there's the Fulbright scholarships.
Right.
And then also the AUW International Fellowships.
Yes, and they offer a fantastic opportunity to cover tuition and living expenses.
Yeah. And then for careers, there are tons of options at biotech companies, research institutions, pharmaceutical companies.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got the big players like Pfizer, Novartis, and Merck all based there.
Okay, so moving over to the UK.
The UK, yes. Well, it's always been known for its research excellence.
Right.
It has a long tradition in this space, and it's got these world-renowned institutions like Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial College London.
Yeah, I think you're right. It has that kind of history of scientific discovery.
Right.
And there are some scholarships there, too.
Yes, you've got the Havening scholarships and the Commonwealth scholarships.
Right, yeah.
Both great options for financial support.
Yeah. And in terms of work, there's a lot of biotech startups that are...
Yes, definitely a growing area.
Yeah.
And then you've got research within the National Health Service, the NHS.
Right.
And of course, the big pharmaceutical companies have a presence there, too.
Yeah. Okay, what about Germany?
Germany is a very interesting option.
Right.
For one thing, public universities generally offer tuition-free education for international students.
Oh, wow. That's great.
That's a huge draw for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they're also a major player on the global biotech scene. Some key universities to think about there are Heidelberg University, TU Munich, and RWTH Aachen.
Wow. Those are some really good schools.
Yes, very well respected. And it's not just free tuition either.
Okay.
There are scholarships like the DAD-Lead scholarships
Right.
and the Deutschland Stipendium, which can help cover your living expenses.
Yeah. And I've heard that Germany's particularly strong in bioengineering firms.
They are, yes.
And they have a huge pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
And they do a lot of medical research.
It's a great option if you're looking for a career in those areas.
Okay, great. How about Canada?
Canada is another one that's growing really rapidly.
Yeah.
They have a lot of government investment in the sector.
Right.
Top universities include the University of Toronto, McGill University, and UBC.
Yeah, those are all really excellent schools.
They are.
Yeah. And I think I saw the Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarships and Ontario Graduate Scholarships mentioned.
Yes, they offer some great funding opportunities.
Yeah. And it seems like a lot of the careers in Canada are centered around biotech companies
Yes.
and health research centers
Yeah.
and the healthcare industry in general.
Definitely. A lot of potential there.
Okay. And Australia.
Australia is emerging as a real powerhouse in biotechnology,
Okay.
partly because of its leading universities, but also because of some big government funding initiatives. The main universities there are the University of Melbourne, ANU, and the University of Sydney.
Okay, those are some good schools too.
Yes, very good.
And there are some scholarships there as well. I think it was the Australia Awards and Endeavour Scholarships.
Yes, those are two of the main ones.
Yeah. And it looks like Australia has some really interesting opportunities in agriculture
Yeah, that's a big one there.
and bioinformatics
Mhm.
and then medical biotech.
Right. A good mix of specializations. And we should also briefly touch on Singapore.
Yeah.
While it wasn't mentioned as much as some of the other countries, it's definitely worth considering. They've made some really strategic investments in biomedical sciences,
Right.
and their research infrastructure is top-notch, particularly in areas like biopharmaceutical manufacturing.
Interesting.
So if you're interested in the Asian biotech landscape, it's definitely a place to look into.
Yeah. So we've got the places. Now let's look at what you're actually going to study. The articles mentioned the main degree levels. So we have BSc, MSc, and PhD.
Right. The usual suspects.
In biotechnology.
Yeah.
So a Bachelor of Science, that's your undergraduate foundational degree.
Yeah, your starting point.
And it looks like it covers all those core scientific disciplines.
Right. Things like microbiology,
Yep.
genetics, biochemistry, bioengineering.
Yeah.
It's a great foundation for those wanting to move into industry or to set themselves up for further research.
Yeah. And then the Master of Science, that's a little more in depth, right?
Yes, it goes into more of the latest advancements and specializations within the field. You might look at things like environmental biotechnology. There's a stronger focus on research, and you get more opportunities to connect with the industry.
Yeah. And then the PhD is really for people who want to go into...
Yeah, for the real research enthusiasts.
Yeah, serious research.
Exactly. For independent research, thinking about an academic career
Right.
or a high-level research position.
Yeah. And some of the specializations that they mentioned are bioinformatics, gene therapy, drug development.
So you can really niche down and focus on what you're passionate about.
Okay. Now, if you want to get into these programs,
Yeah.
what are some of the things you have to do?
Right. Well, there are some common academic qualifications
Yeah.
and other requirements that you need to be aware of.
Yeah. So for a bachelor's degree, you usually need to have completed your secondary education.
Right. So high school
Yeah.
with good grades in science subjects.
Yeah. And it looks like they always mention biology, physics, and chemistry.
Yeah, they're the key ones.
Yeah. For a master's, you'll need a relevant undergraduate degree
Right.
with a good GPA.
Exactly.
And then for a PhD, you usually need a master's degree in a related field.
Pretty standard stuff, really.
Yeah.
But one thing that's really important to remember is that since these programs are taught in English,
Right.
you'll need to prove your English proficiency. So things like IELTS, TOEFL, PT.
Yeah. And I saw some numbers for those.
Yeah. Typically, you're looking at IELTS 6.5 or higher, TOEFL 90 or higher, and PT 60 or higher.
Okay.
But it's really crucial to check each university's website
Yeah.
because the requirements can vary.
Yeah. That's good advice.
Don't just assume it's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
And apart from your grades and your English skills, you'll also usually need a statement of purpose.
Right.
So that's where you explain your academic goals,
Yeah.
why you want to study at that particular university, why you're a good fit for the program.
Yeah. And also letters of recommendation.
Yes, definitely.
From professors or supervisors.
People who can vouch for your abilities.
Yeah.
And for PhD programs, you'll need a research proposal
Right.
outlining your research project.
Yeah. And they mentioned that in some cases, work experience could be helpful.
Absolutely. It can give you a competitive edge.
Okay. And we talked about scholarships a little bit when we were talking about the countries.
We did, yes.
But it's worth mentioning again that there are so many scholarships available
There are.
to help international students.
Exactly. And they can be quite substantial.
Yeah, like the Fulbright in the U.S., the Commonwealth in the U.K., the DIAD in Germany, the Venier in Canada.
Yeah, and the Australia Awards.
Yeah.
These scholarships can cover your tuition, your living expenses, even your travel costs sometimes.
Wow, so they can really make a difference.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, so you do all this work,
Yeah.
you get accepted,
Yeah.
you graduate.
You're all set.
What kind of careers can you actually get?
Well, there's a huge variety of career paths available to biotechnology graduates.
Okay.
Some of the most popular areas are pharmaceuticals and drug development,
Mm-hmm.
where you could be working for companies like Pfizer, Novartis, Merck.
Right, those big names?
Yeah. Then there's genetic engineering and
Yeah.
CRISPR research, which is a really exciting and rapidly growing field.
Yeah.
And then bioinformatics and computational biology are becoming increasingly important. Analyzing all that data that's generated in biological research.
Yeah. And they talk about environmental biotechnology.
Yes, applying biotech principles to solve environmental problems.
Yeah.
And medical biotechnology and healthcare innovations are always evolving,
Yep.
offering tons of career options.
Right. And then they do talk about some of the challenges.
Right. It's important to be realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things like tuition fees and living costs.
Yeah, those can be a big hurdle for some people.
Yeah. But we talked about scholarships, so that can help.
Absolutely.
And then just the tough admission requirements.
Yeah, you need to have a strong academic record
Mhm.
and really put effort into your application.
Yeah.
And visas and immigration can be a real headache.
Yeah.
It's important to start your application process early
Right.
and maybe even get some guidance from international student advisors.
Yeah. And they also talk about making sure that the universities you're looking at have good research opportunities.
That's crucial, yes.
Yeah. And then just adjusting to a new culture and a new language.
Yeah, it's a big change for a lot of people.
Yeah. And then finally actually finding a job after you graduate.
Right, it can be competitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they say it's important to do internships
Yes, definitely.
and to think about countries that have good job prospects.
Right, like Germany, the U.S., Canada.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say you're thinking about going in 2025.
Okay.
What are some tips that we can give?
Well, the sources have a really helpful checklist.
Okay.
And the first thing is to choose the right country.
Right.
One that aligns with your goals.
Yeah.
And then research the universities in those countries really thoroughly. Look at their programs, their research facilities, their industry connections.
Yeah.
We've mentioned some of the top universities like MIT, Stanford, Harvard,
Yeah.
University of Toronto, UBC,
Mm.
Heidelberg, RWTH, Aiken,
Right.
Oxford, Cambridge.
Yeah. And then also look at the specific specializations within those programs.
Yes, absolutely. Make
Yeah.
sure they match up with what you want to do.
Yeah. And don't forget about scholarships.
Absolutely not.
Apply for as many as you can.
And make sure you meet all the admission requirements.
Right, like the GRE for some U.S. universities.
Exactly. And really spend time on your statement of purpose
Yeah.
and get those strong letters of recommendation.
Yeah.
And gaining research experience beforehand is a big plus.
Yeah.
So think about doing internships or research projects and think about job opportunities too.
Right.
Are there internships or jobs linked to the universities you're looking at?
Yeah.
And remember, visas and work permits are crucial,
Yeah.
especially if you're thinking about staying in the country after you graduate. Like Canada and Australia have some good post-study work options.
Okay, yeah. And they also say to network.
Yeah, talk to alumni,
Yeah.
talk to professors, get their insights.
Yeah. And definitely compare the tuition fees and living costs.
Absolutely. You need to know what you're getting into financially
Yeah.
and keep up with the latest trends like
Yeah.
CRISPR,
Yeah.
synthetic biology, bioinformatics.
Yeah. The field is always changing.
Right. You need to stay ahead of the curve.
Okay. And the articles have some case studies of students who used a company called Letzstudy
Yeah.
to apply to programs abroad.
Right. So we have Rahul,
Yeah.
who got into Harvard for his master's in biotechnology,
Okay.
got a scholarship, and is now doing research in genetic engineering.
Wow.
Then there's Arian,
Yeah.
who went to Germany to RWTH Aiken for bioinformatics.
Okay.
He got free tuition
Right.
and a dad scholarship.
Yeah.
And now he's working in sustainable biotechnology research.
Oh, that's great.
And Kartika
Yeah.
did a master's in applied biotechnology at the University of Toronto. got an internship at a biotech startup,
Okay.
and is now starting their own business.
Wow, that's really impressive.
So you can see it's definitely possible to achieve your goals if you put in the work and get the right support.
Right. So it really sounds like studying biotechnology abroad could be a really amazing opportunity.
It is.
It gives you access to cutting-edge research, potential for a global career.
Yes.
So many different areas to specialize in.
Absolutely. But it is important to choose the right country, the right university, the right program.
Yeah, think about the research opportunities, the industry connections,
Right.
the costs,
The scholarships,
and what the rules are for working after you graduate.
Right. So here's something to think about as we wrap up here. What really excites you about biotechnology?
Right.
What really gets you going?
That's a great question.
Yeah. And once you know that,
Yeah.
start looking at the universities, the research labs that are doing really cool work in that area.
All around the world.
Yeah.
Don't limit yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So think of this deep dive as the starting point.
Yeah, your springboard for your own research.
Exactly.
Go explore.
Okay. Well, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.